Let's see what's going on here, everybody. How's it going? Oh no. Let me see something. Oh no. Well, I'm gonna have to flip this one, I think. I think it's in reverse. Are you hearing me, everybody? All right. All right. Let me see. I'm trying to see, like, it's not showing my usual little audio pops on here. So with a little thing that goes up and down. But anyways, let's see. We're squared up. If you haven't noticed, there's a problem. I need the Blickman sign behind me reads in reverse because I'm using my streaming camera right now as opposed to just my standard one. And let's see. Let me see. Oh, I wonder if I can flip it right here. How's everybody doing? We're let's see what this does. Auto white balance? No. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm switching the adjustments on the camera, and I don't know if it's showing up like immediately for you or not. But and then let me see here. Oh wow, I have all sorts of funny things I can be doing. But listen, it's after 8. Should I think I might need to start doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing here. Hey, we have some familiar names in here. We've got we got a whole bunch of stars in there. Goodness gracious. I see Evan Elridge. Really, unless I'm crazy, maybe I have a question from you today. Do I have? Okay, I have one from Robert Ellingwood. Maybe that's where my brain was. But yeah, we got Evan in there. We got Lake Moran, September and June. Jamie Tripp. We got Spunding und Wert. There in the chat. It's a veritable list of chat room all stars. Okay. Oh, the Yeti is cold. It is. I pre-cooled it. I had it in the fridge. 2 Kroger tangerine, carbonated waters. I'm ready to go, baby. I'm hydrated. Let's do this before I start telling you all this stuff. Welcome to Adam Makes Beer. My name is Adam, and welcome to the June 2023 live stream. Ladies and gentlemen, exciting times. It's summer. I don't know if it's summer where you are, but it's summer where I am, baby. Listen, I've got the summer shirt on, the summer button-down short sleeve. I'm doing 2 buttons. Okay? Some people might be like, hey, Adam, only 1 button's necessary, but I'm doing 2. Okay? Is it dangerously low? Maybe. But it's summer. And it's what exactly? Some people thought that, like in the chat, Spunding feels as if this might be R-rated content. I don't blame you. All right. But listen, I've had an amazing day, and I'm not even joking. I don't know. I think I can narrow it down to a couple of things, but I will say this. I took in what I'm going to call a nap, but I slept for 3.5 hours in the middle of the day today. And ladies and gentlemen, I feel fantastic. It just so happens sometimes where apparently like you're exhausted all the time and then your body hurts and stuff like that. And then sometimes you just sleep and then your body stops hurting. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but I experienced that. I went out for a run with my lovely wife. And then full disclosure, I need to shower right now, and I'm not currently super fresh, but I'm probably gonna have a fire after this, not this believable, lovely one behind me, and I'm gonna chit chat with a dear friend afterwards, and I'm gonna need to shower after that. So listen, I just I tried to clean up for you, okay? And you might want to know, who am I talking to? I'm talking to you. All right. So that's what it's about. Let's get into the breakdown of our June show here, the channel update. I will say, out of the chat, 18 plus viewership for this smoke show. Smoke show is it's a favorite of mine. I like it. I'm a big fan of the terminology. It makes me laugh very, very hard. Evan Eldridge is in the chat asking tips on. Ooh, that's a great question. Evan, I have rats. I think I have a series on this. Did I do fruited? I did a couple of maybe that was for Enigma, brother. I'm gonna have to go back and look, but what I have been using, there's a book on Gosa. I'm not gonna be able to dig this up off the top of my head, Evan. But if rats, I'll try to remember to get into my brew log, because I've done a handful of Gosa style beers, fruited tart beers with coriander and sea salt. I feel as if the amount of salt that I'm using is in a really good range. You get kind of just like a vague salinity in the back end on it. And it was actually a volume of kosher salt that I got from my buddy Andy Gallagher down at Linwood Brewing Concern, and I just ran with it. It was a per barrel number. I believe I'm in the 3 pounds plus range for the 15 barrels that I'm doing, but don't quote me on anything like that. There's also the resource for the Gosa book from Brewers Association. That might be a good place to look as well. But I will try to remember to look that up and pull something solid for you. So, Evan Eldridge, that is some of my recommendations on salt levels in Gosa. I'm trying to make that something I can clip out of the beginning section, and I might be able to use that. I don't know. I'm gonna have to watch it later. I'll feel bad if it's too lean of an answer. But anyways, let's start jumping in here, people, because we have good questions this month. We've got a lot to get to, a lot of exciting things. And let's just jump right in. The last time we talked, it was right before CBC in Nashville. It was an absolutely great time. First of all, I would just like to thank all of you that came up to me with your kind words, words of encouragement, everything like that. It means it means so much. All of your praise and gratefulness and all that stuff is really, really humbling. I did the meet and greet at the Blickman booth. That was awesome. We had so many of you come up there. And just hearing, randomly people, holler at a makes beer or just come up and shake my hand and say thanks. It's just really leaves a fella like me feeling grateful. So yeah, thanks so much. CBC, as always, is it's just such a great time for me. I really focus on two things when I'm there. I really work the trade shows, the trade show, and I try to link back up with people that I haven't seen in a while. And sometimes that whole notion of networking is a little corny or whatever. And sometimes it's just, I don't know, it's just like code for getting hammered or something like that. But I mean, it's good to actually get together and talk to your people that you haven't seen in a while. Whether that's on kind of the friends you make on the trade room floor with the the industry suppliers, or your brewing friends, industry friends. It was really just tremendous. I got to spend some fantastic times with some friends of the show that Rock Van Meter and his beautiful wife and I spent some time together. That was absolutely amazing. I got some great time with the Linwood boys, Bill Gerds, Andy Gallagher. Shout out to Theodore, Ted, owner over there at Linwood. It was just good, man. It was good to get out there and see everybody. We had this house. I was up there with the saucy dogs, and we had a house up there that we were staying in, and they had a rooftop thing going on. It was awesome. On the drive down to Nashville, I bought myself some cheap, just about to expire steaks, because I knew there probably wasn't going to be a lot of breakfast stuff that I could be eating at this conference. So I go up there every morning, and at 6:30 in the morning, I'd be grilling a steak. I'd sit up there and look at the skyline and eat that steak in the morning. Just a beautiful time, man. Nashville's a fun spot. I didn't get too Nashville-y with it, but did hit up some good spots, and it seems like a place where you can have a solid amount of fun. So CBC was fantastic. It does go right along with the World Beer Cup, and I would like to give a tip of the hat to a longtime friend and supporter of the show, Rockney Van Meter, because I believe Mr. Van Meter won yet another gold medal at World Beer Cup. And it was on the Belgian side. Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly. Rock, if you are listening and are so inclined to want to send me a text and remind me what beer that was. But I jumped up when his name was announced, and I just started screaming his name as if some 40-some years ago I birthed him myself. I screamed for him as if he were my child. I think it may have been the triple, yeah. And he hauls it in, man. It's a beautiful thing. It's always hard. I didn't have beers in this year. I will next year. I just got the message that GABF is coming up, and we'll probably have some beers in there. I've never won at either of those two big ones. I've had some beers that I made before, that after I no longer worked at the brewery, the beer won. Some different things like that. I've been a part of some pretty good teams, but that'd be a fun thing to check that off the list. But a whole lot of love to Rock and Sabrina Van Meter, and congratulations on that medal. Up next, I'd like to just give a shout out to Cody and Muddy Creek Brewing. We had a couple of our listeners stopping into the brewery. They were traveling in from out of town. They were kind enough to stop in, drop off beer for me and Josh back there. Very, very kind of you. I was able to spend a little bit of time with Muddy Creek and the boys, and talk beer, give them a tour of the place. So it was a lot of fun. Always appreciate those listeners that come up, and we get to talk beer face to face a little bit. So if you ever do swing through that area, and I have time, shoot me a message on Instagram or something like that. And if I have time, and I'm going to be around there. I'd be more than happy to shake a hand and show you behind the curtain in real time, face to face. What else? We have, oh, Jenny Reed. My girl Jenny Reed is going to be joining us for my June industry professional interview. Jenny Reed is the brewer over at one of the pubs for 50 West. I believe it's like Chillicothe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not from here. Okay. So I don't know if you actually say Chillicothe. I think you say Chillicothe, but she is their pub brewer over at Chillicothe. And Ryan, who is somebody else who you're going to get to know probably a little bit later this summer when I interview him. Ryan is one of the brewers over at the production facility. He's been at the pub as well for 50 West here in Cincinnati. He's just always raved about Jenny. And I had the opportunity to chat with her when we did the Sip Trip collaboration that we did between Cartridge and 50 West. And just absolutely delightful, just a really, really smart woman, and really passionate about what she's doing. And what I was interested in is she went to UC Davis. And I think it's an interesting topic to discuss because a lot of what I want to be doing with this channel is kind of making information available as far as the pro brewing world goes. I've maybe said it a million times. I'm not trying to come off like I am the end all be all source of all information, but I definitely want to be sharing everything that I do know, that I have experienced. And so being that there is this educational kind of / training element to what I'm doing here on YouTube, talking the subject of brewing school is interesting to me because, I mean, Jenny was taught by a whole bunch of people that I have, like a whole lot of love for, Dr. Charles Bamforth, and slipping my mind, another British gentleman that will come to mind a little bit later. But some of these real educational rock stars in our field, and I want to talk. I want to talk taking that path into the industry because I get questions about it. And then we're also going to be talking brewing and a beer style. That's going to be TBD. She and I are having conversations about it. We are. Let me pull up this chat that we have going on together. The 23rd, June 23rd, Jenny Reed and I are going to be sitting down. So that'll be fun. You're going to want to look out for that. I'll post requests for questions and everything like that as we go. I'm going to kick myself at some point in this because I was relatively well prepared today, but I know that there was one more thing that I wanted to include in my little opening notes, but it has slipped the mind. So at some point I might shout out something else random that's not related to the question that I'm asking. But I mentioned before that I got to spend some time with my buddies over at Blickman. Got to hang out over at the booth over there. At the booth they had at the conference at CBC, they had a new burner setup that I don't know if it is completely public yet, but it's a new style electric burner that you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for. It was very cool. They had their keg washer out there. They had some cool things out. So let's segue into a word from our sponsor. Blickman Engineering has been the pioneer of nano brewing, and they have helped hundreds of successful breweries achieve their dreams. since they started with 1-barrel systems in 2006, now offering a full suite of brew houses up to 15 barrels skidded and insulated, matching cellaring equipment, keg washers, grain mills, and more, sized specifically for the nano brewer. Blickman Engineering systems are competitively priced without sacrificing quality. And the simple design and factory direct support from our brewing experts gets you up and running faster than anything else on the market. When you're ready to go pro or just kicking the tires, be sure to reach out to them for expert advice and a partner to help you through it all. Turn your dreams into a reality by reaching out to Phil, Tom, or Josh at Pro Series at blickmanengineering.com. Again, that's Pro Series at blickmanengineering.com. Blickman Engineering Pro Brewing is proud to be the equipment sponsor for this channel and is committed to helping every brewer, no matter where they are in their journey. So, tip of the hat to our friends at Blickman. But this is what you're here for. This is why you tuned in. This is why the chat is absolutely flooded. This is why there's 10, 15, maybe even like 17,000 people watching live right now. You came here for the Q&A. All right? You got some Q's. I'm dropping some A's. First question comes from a friend of the show. September and June on YouTube. Hey there, Adam Makes Beer. What pressure did you ferment that lager at? And beside the lacing or head retention, was there any ester in there? September and June and I have been having an ongoing conversation about the lagers that we're fermenting, the fact that I am doing some, I just brewed that hoppy pills with a spunding valve, and so this is the backdrop for this conversation. I'm assuming you fermented at an elevated temp. The reason I'm asking is I brewed a red lager and it went into the fermenter at 61 degrees. That was the lowest I could get it, because we're talking summertime and sometimes it's hard getting those beers knocked out as cold as you want. I set the fermenter to 49. When I came in the next morning, it was at 58 degrees. So I threw the spunding valve on there and gassed it up to 10 psi and have let it go from there. It's still at 10 psi and the temp has dropped over the days, but you think it'll taste like a lager, or you think that I caught it in time and the pressure was high enough to mute ester formations, etc. So he's bringing up an interesting point here, and there's a lot of variables already included. But one of the important things is that one of the side effects of fermenting under pressure tends to be the reduction of ester formation, and that's what September is referring to right here. I asked him for some follow-up data, some more details, maybe some more. Hold on, let's see. I asked him for some more, whether it be details, fermentation details, sensory stuff like that. He said the red lager tasted fine. It started at 1066, so that's a big boy, on May 25th, and is currently at 1024 and at 48 degrees. It was sent to the FV on May 25th at 61, the lowest I could get it, and on 5/26, it was at 58 degrees and fermenting vigorously. I put the spunding valve on and pressurized the FV to 10, left the temp alone. It's still running at 49 degrees. From a sensory standpoint, he doesn't seem to be picking up any issues or having anything be or anything be off as far as the fermentation goes. Now September's doing a range of things here, right? He is fermenting down at 49 ultimately, but he had to knock out closer to 61. So the first time the yeast is making contact with that wort, it's at a warmer temperature. I do believe you can, and I'll say this: I think it's worth exploring how clean of a beer you can make at higher temperatures with lagers. There's some anecdotal evidence that suggests, especially with something like 3470, that fermentation temperature range for clean lager may be a little bit broader than what we might think sometimes. That will also come down to yeast health, viability, everything like that. But so he was pitching warmer because that's as warm, as cool as he can get his wort, and continued to crash it at another ultimately 12 degrees. He knew that there's the potential of maybe he's going to have some more esters form as that beer is fermenting. And so he slapped the spunding valve on, put it up to 10 psi to potentially start, hey, maybe we can suppress this. Maybe we can suppress this ester formation a little bit. Thus far, he said it's smelling just fine, smelling clean. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on right here. First of all, the thing I'm always scared about with pitching warmer and then cooling down is I'm always worried that I'm going to signal the yeast to go to sleep. Okay. I know that might sound silly, but that's what whenever I was dealing with ale yeast, I was thinking, well, if I'm supposed to be fermenting with American ale yeast at 68 degrees and as a 10-degree drop, maybe that yeast will want to start flocking out. And maybe that's true. Maybe there is something to that. Maybe it's a little bit of wives' tale. So I've always hesitated to want to warmer pitch and then cool down, especially in that 10 to 12 degrees range, because that's a fair amount. But it isn't until we do these things and then find out. So what I'm excited to find out here with this red lager September and June is ultimately how does this thing come out for you? The things that pop into my head, and I'm not even going to call them like red flags, but they're things that I don't necessarily understand right now, or they're things that I'm concerned about, and they're things that like give me hesitancy, like in my own mind. Now, all that said, what you have going on with this, I'm really anxious to find out, like, because it's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's going to be good data points for me. One thing that I would look at, and I know that you do cell counting and viability. One of the issues of potentially starting your spunding immediately, or your fermentation pressure, an elevated fermentation pressure immediately, is you can put more stress on your yeast when you're doing that. Okay. So the thing that I would ask you to track and see if there's any differences is, are you seeing a difference in cell growth? Are you seeing like a lot more yeast? Is there less yeast that you can harvest out of there? How does that yeast look? Do you have higher viability, or do you have more dead cells, right? Different things like that. Those are some things that I would keep an eye on. It seems as if your fermentation drop is nice and robust right now, and you're following an excellent fermentation curve. So my baby is screaming bloody murder in the other room, and it distracted me for a second. But so those are some of the things that I would look out for, because listen, the beer's going to tell the story, right? So you're going to get that beer done, you're going to get it finished, and I know you filter these beers. And I think that's an important thing. I think sometimes some of the yeast character that comes from a beer, I think that beers almost always taste a little bit fruitier when they have some level of haze still left in them. So I know that you get those lagers beautifully, brilliantly clear, and I think that's one of the parts of it. But yeah, man, I'm interested to see the impact on the yeast health from fermenting consistently under pressure the whole time. The last time when I spunded with the hoppy pills that I just made, I waited to spun toward the end because I wasn't looking so much at trying to push back ester formation. I just really wanted to capture the amount of CO2 I needed to carbonate that beer naturally. That was really my goal with that. September is in the chat. It was the last generation that I was going to use anyways. So see, because you're smart. So I'm glad our heads are in the same place here. I was going to use anyway, so that wasn't a concern, but I will cell count and give that info when I do that. I really appreciate that, man. That would be interesting to me, even to see like the typical volume of what you have going on in there, the volume of yeast that you have in there, and then what that viability looks like. That might be something telling. And another thing that I would look out for is I would continue to you may be accustomed to when that yeast strain, September, is it 3470 that you're using, or is it something else? But if being that you spunded like this time, and it was 2206 off the top, I'm not sure which one that is, but I can find a conversion chart for it. But anyways, the information is out there, so that's good. If you are used to that lager strain, and you're used to if and when it produces sulfur, keep being aware of it. All right, like keep going for it and stay suspicious of sulfur until you get that beer into the glass. Okay, because I had some interesting conversations with the great and powerful Alex Gruber from Imperial Yeast, and we were talking about sulfur production and pressure, and things can happen at different points. Like he was saying, you can be past sulfur when you're spooning a beer, and or you throw the sulfur you typically throw with the fermentation with a lager strain that and then maybe you spun, it builds pressure. It might throw sulfur again as a reaction to the pressure. So something just to keep in the back of your mind and to think on as you're approaching this whole question. How often do you spun those lagers, September, and do you always do it like that, ferment on it up front? That's tasty. Never. Okay, so it's a new practice. So just be like, I hate to sound like super dramatic, but just be hyper vigilant, man. And I know that's gonna be your thing in general, but taste and smell throughout this process, and just really try to dig up those things that are atypical for what your lager practices are. Because again, like, you're doing some things that I don't have the nerve to do right now. I'm not saying they're wrong, because I know where your brain is, and we talked about like why you would be doing these things. So this is good stuff for me to hear. So let's keep lines of communication open on this. That's at least my thought process when implementing some spunning procedures, some fermentation, pressure fermentation concepts in a real life beer. So anyways, we'll see September and June. As always, a delight. Next question is from Beautiful Fool Brewing on Instagram. Love Italian Pilsners and had yours last year. Thank you. What are your thoughts on the brewing water for that style? I'll give you some real lean points on it. It's not real lean. I've got some target information, baby. I think that Italian pills, for me, there are almost no beers that I push sulfate on. I'm not making a West Coast IPA currently. If I was making a West Coast IPA, I would probably still be 2-to-1 chloride to sulfate and try to make sure I'm getting 100 parts of calcium into the finished beer. That's what I would be doing with that style. But Italian Pils is it's a great style, man. It's exciting. I've got MGC Pils in keg right now. We are not tapping it just yet, but I'm really excited for kind of this next step. I say that this Italian Pils, this hoppy Pils style might kind of be my forever beer. I'm pleased with this most recent iteration of it. I feel like it's a step in the right direction. But talking about water for Italian Pils, I don't want to go like really crazy with with the water on that. As far as making like an absolute sulfate bomb, I do think that a slightly elevated sulfate number, though, is going to drive a dryness to that beer style that I think is really enjoyable. And I think it's one of the things that chips it up a little bit, man. It's one of the things that says Pilsner to me. I drank a beautiful German Pils from my friend Ryan over at 50 West. If you are in the Cincinnati area and you can get your hands on a can of their Pilsner or go over to the pub and have their Pilsner, it's just a beautiful classic German Pils, man. And the water is such a big part of that. I do think that a nice solid amount of sulfate in that beer is, I think your water should feature it. When it comes to Italian Pils, though, I will push up that sulfate a little bit, and as far as the chloride sulfate ratio goes. But I'll probably look for a beer like that. I'll probably look for 100 parts per million calcium, because for me, when I get to 100 parts, I have an easier time getting those beers clear. Maybe that's just me and my processes. But then I would look to get of a ratio of 2-to-1 sulfate to chloride. You could potentially go higher in some styles and, maybe push it up, 3-to-1 sulfate to chloride. But I don't think I don't think you need to with this beer. You don't have to go super wild with it. Get a little chloride in there too. But do something like a 2-to-1 ratio, sulfate to chloride, and then kind of keep that total calcium at 100 parts, and let it rip like that, and then kind of make some decisions from there. Yeah, so that's kind of that's what I did with that. That's what we did, because the Italian Pils you had last year. Oh, maybe it was well, either way, Sip Trip last year was an Italian Pils that we did as a collaboration with 50 West, and then there was also we basically brought back Hotel Tango, which was Maggie's Pils. We brought that beer back as like a variation of Sip Trip. So it was another Italian Pils. So if you enjoyed that beer, that's the water approach that was taken with it. So beautiful Fool Brewing on Instagram. Thank you for your question. Oh, here's one thing that I should mention. Oh, and I'm going to tie this in. To, you're going to make me jump ahead, because I've got 2 questions on this. Let me see. Where is it? Curtis on YouTube and Spunding und Wirt. on YouTube asked some similar questions, or some questions that go together. The question from Curtis: do you guys distribute your cans? So does Cartridge distribute your cans to Columbus, or just sell them out of the tap room? I definitely love to try some. I saw that you won some medals at the Ohio Craft Brewers Cup last year, so congrats on that. And then Spunding und Wirt said, what beers have you been brewing for summer? Right now, I have been brewing beer for a big ramp up into distribution with Saucy Brew Works, man. Because we kind of shifted a little bit, and I'm going to be doing more production right now out of the out of the Cincinnati brewery. So originally there was discussion that maybe we would do a little bit more R&D stuff, but it looks like for the foreseeable future, we will be operating as a production house. And so I will be producing 12-ounce cans, 16-ounce cans, primarily of two beers. Our two core beers are going to be a beer called The Squeeze, which is a low 5% fruit beer, 13 IBU. It has pink guava and some passion fruit, and slipping off the top of my head, it's one other. It's been I've been busy, but we've got a nice little fruit medley in there. I'm going to call it a medley. Super drinkable, super crushable. Good for year-round drinking. That's going to be in can. 12-ounce can. Our other 12-ounce can will be a beer called Freak Beat, our hazy IPA. That's a high 6% hazy with Mosaic and Idaho 7 in there. Those beers will both be around year-round in 12-ounce cans and kegs if you are out on the scene looking for some keg package to purchase. And then we are going to have another 12 beers, another 12 seasonal beers that will be rolled out. You guessed it, seasonally. So, yeah, man, we're gearing up for that. So, Spooning, to answer your question, that's what we've been gearing up for right now. Kind of, it's not really downshifting, but I was in a situation where I had different beers in every tank, and now we're getting back in. We're moving back into, or moving into, more of a production house type model where I'm going to be brewing more Squeeze, more Freak Beat, and then on into the seasonals. There will be time for me to also be making some one-off beers that you'll see in the pub and things like that, but mostly just gearing up for this work that we're about to start doing with Heidelberg here. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm looking forward to, I'm hoping that the store shelf visibility with the cans, the branding is great. Joe, Marissa over at headquarters in Cleveland have done some beautiful work on all the design, all the copy. So some cool stuff going on there, and I'm looking forward to getting those handsome cans on the shelf and hopefully drawing some people into the brewery itself. I think there's plenty of people that still haven't been in, and that building itself is just it's just a little jewel there, man. You know, that beautiful renovation that they did, the historical landmark, getting getting touched up, fixed up, and making it live again. So yeah, very very cool. So there's a couple things for you. Thank you very much, Spoonding, and my boy Curtis. Thank you for the question. Yeah, man, collared shirt. I mean, it's being talked about in the chat. I mean, it's a collared shirt, baby. It's summertime. Okay, the sleeves are shorter. All right. I'm in here. I'm just trying to hold it down. I'm trying to do my thing. I had to comb my hair or push my fingers through it. I'm not wearing a hat. And again, maybe the shirt's dangerously low cut, dude. Okay. I'm just gonna stop being dumb. Were you surprised? Spunding und Wirt asked a great question. If you guys have not, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not watched the interview that I did with Bill Gerds from Linwood Brewing, he has head up brewing ops down there and has got a stack of big awards that he just sits on every night. He just sits on him every night and pets his pig Ernesto. You heard? Billy G, when he and I were talking West Coast IPA, man, Spooning brings up, he said, were you surprised to hear Gerds uses is 3-to-1 chloride to sulfate? And did that change the way you look at brewing other beer styles? So we've talked about that kind of as we went. And what I found is I've just been pushing chloride in essentially everything I make. I don't make a West Coast beer. I don't make a West Coast IPA. So I don't do anything. I don't push chloride on anything like that. My hazy stuff is chloride forward. I don't put sulfate on the West Coast. I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but all the hazy beers I do push chloride. Every other beer I do pushes chloride. Sometimes I'll go a little bit closer. I'll have a little bit of sulfate in some of the lagers that I make, but I'm pushing chloride in those beers. I mean, I don't know. I have ordered so many more 50-pound bags of chloride since we've opened this brewery than I have sulfate. So yeah, I've been on the chloride thing for a while, pushing that volume up, and yeah. So anyways, yeah. No, I got shorts on, dude. Don't worry about it. K Brown, love the channel. I love you. I'll just say it. Hey, Cowboy Brewer. Hey, Human on Earth. Boy, it's filling up in here. We got T Porter in there, boy. Look out. Next question is from Mark on Instagram. Hi, I have a question. I hope you don't mind answering. I don't. I took a beer to the Bright Tank, carbed it at 17 psi up to 12 psi, so 12 psi in the tank. So he was applying 17 pounds of pressure through the carb stone, and it got him to 12 psi in the tank. I kegged it and it tastes flat. Is there any fix to that? We're going to discuss this through in a couple of different ways. One of the variables that was not mentioned was the temperature of the beer in the Bright Tank. Now, through further questions, the temperature of his beer in the Bright Tank was perfectly acceptable, but is one of the things you have to consider. He was at 34 degrees, and you'll have no problem carbonating your beer at 34 degrees. However, if he moved that beer in there at 45 degrees and was trying to carbonate it, it's not gonna work for you, boys and girls. That gas is not going to want to go into solution at higher temperatures. Pardon me. That CO2 gas is not going to want to go into solution as readily at higher temperatures. It wants to go in at cold temperatures. It's going to be easier to carbonate a beverage at 33 degrees than it will be at 45 degrees. Okay. So that is one issue. That was the first little thing that popped up in my head when I asked that question, but temperature was not an issue. The next thing that brought up in my mind was there's kind of this little implication of wetting pressure in there, WHETTING pressure, which is basically just the volume of pressure that needs to be applied to your carbonation stone in order for you to start passing gas through it. I'm just saying passing gas, and you're going to have to deal with it because you're an adult. Don't giggle because I said pass gas. But a lot of times the wetting pressure of stones like this may be around 5 psi. So if you want to get a beer up to 12 psi in the tank, you would have to set it X pounds higher. I would trial and error that out. I'm going through that right now. I have a new set of carbonation stones in the brewery that we are feeling out and figuring out how we need to operate, kind of exactly what the wetting pressure is, functionally in the tank. There's ways you can test it and whatever, but we're kind of just functionally tracking what we're doing in the tank, because I can't replicate the exact situation of the tank in any other way. And so you're looking at that pressure going through there, the wetting pressure that we just talked about. And then we'll kind of go big picture. If you have gotten a beer into a keg and it's too low, and it's too low carb, you have a couple of options, and they're not all perfect and they're not all exact. But I made a living at a place. I was paid to work at a place where I would fill a half barrel up to like 14 and a half gallons. And then I would apply like 40 pounds of 40 psi of gas head pressure onto that keg as it was cold, and then lower it to 20 the next day, and then lower it down to whatever. That's not the exact recipe that I used. But if you have head pressure in that keg, you can hit it with more static gas and just do like a head pressure carb and bring that up. I had a flat barrel-aged beer, relatively flat barrel-aged beer that has been sitting in a keg for quite some time. I put that into the cooler. I know I had headspace in it. So I just put 12 psi on that thing because I wanted to enter that in an upcoming competition. So I did that for 2 weeks. It was in the cooler for 2 weeks on 12 psi. That's one way you can do it. You can speed that up by doing higher pressures. You will want to blow that gas down on that keg before you try hooking it up to your draft system. Otherwise, it's really going to be shooting out of there. A lot of your keg couplers that you're going to see on your draft system are going to have a small ring on the side that you can pull. So what you could do is you could put your coupler on, engage it, and cut the gas to it so there's not gas feeding in, and then pull that little pressure relief, and it'll actually degas the keg, and then turn your gas back on, and it'll bring the keg back up to 12 psi or whatever you're serving at. Try to serve it from there. Just draft line tips. So there's that, and then there's also shaking. I've shaken a keg or two. I think it's non-ideal, but again, you do need head space in that keg in order to push that, in order to help facilitate forcing that gas into solution. But you can shake it. Way back in the day, me and Bill Gurge used to call that thing doing the Sean T's, boy. If you don't know who Sean T is, Google him. But he does the insanity workout videos. And so whenever we used to shake kegs of root beer that we were making in house. So we would get it cold and then put it on heavy pressure and then shake it. And like we would take turns doing sets of 100. So you just shake it. And then they were known as Sean T's. And if you ever got tired while you were trying to shake that keg, sometimes just screaming out the name Sean T would bring you some more power. So just some helpful hints for the brew house. But those are some ways that you can address that issue of a lower carbed beer in the keg. And Mark, I appreciate your question, brother. Thank you. Oh, the old keg rolling? Heck yeah, baby. You can roll the keg. Yeah. Look at all you. Look at all this stuff popping off in here. People are chatting it up in there, man. Can't be stopped. Next question is from Vlad Squared on YouTube. Hey, Adam, love your work. Thank you. Thoughts on cone shaving lagers? I know German lager brewers use float tanks to similar effect, but I worry about removing, and I'm doing this, note this, I'm inserting this here. I'm worried about removing the bottom fermenting yeast and ruining my pitch. Talk to me about the conversation. This was the question I was going to be asking because of a conversation I had with Alex Gruba. My little thing was talk about the conversation I had with the great and powerful Alex Gruba about cone shaving lagers. So, Vlad, here you go, man. Perfect timing. When I was in there working the trade room floor, you know what I mean? I'm at CBC, I'm all business, and I'm on the trade room floor. I'm going around, I'm avoiding eye contact of salespeople that I don't want to be talking to. I'm trying to avoid like the super aggressive salesperson that comes up and doesn't even he can't even see my name tag. And he's like, hey man, I sent you an email. I was just wondering if we could talk about blah. I was in like a legitimate conversation with another human being while this was happening, and we were walking. And dude rolls up like that on me. Don't do that to me at a trade show. Don't do that to anyone in any situation. I'm anti-sales behavior like that. But I had a great conversation with my lovely people at Imperial. Shout out to Nina and shout out to my man, Alex. You had a fantastic conversation about cone shaving. And we got to the part where, and I actually asked him this exact question. I'm like, okay, so I just did a Hoppy Pills. Is there utility to me cone shaving a lager that is a bottom fermenting yeast? And when I air quoted bottom fermenting, Alex's eyebrows went up. I got like a real reaction out of him because it's a little bit of a misnomer to say that lager strains are bottom fermenting. What Alex's feedback was when we discussed this, anything, especially in the early portions of fermentation, anything that's down at the bottom of your tank more than likely isn't doing anything, whether that is ale yeast or lager yeast. When a yeast is fermenting your beer, it is up in solution. He said he has no problem with the notion of even like days 1 through 3 of shaving the bottom of that cone a little bit. I think especially if you're doing a beer like I was talking about doing, which is something maybe a little bit non-traditional, a little bit more late hop Pilsner, that might be something interesting to check into. Long term, it might actually give you a cleaner tasting beer. It might actually help with your yeast harvesting or reharvesting or whatever you want to call it, because you're going to be dropping. He says anything down there is more than likely dead and or not doing you any favors. Okay, so if we're talking about trub from your kettle, hop material from your kettle, or dead yeast, none of those things are things that need to be in there. Okay, so watch yourself, consider it. All right, it was a great conversation that we had surrounding this idea, and cone shaving is something that I'm kind of doing more and more. It can be one more tool, right? So yeah, check it out. Keep tracking and always keep us up to date on what you guys are doing out there in that world of cone shaving and the like. So thank you very much to Vlad Squared and to me, because I kind of asked that question too. Next question comes from Cody on YouTube. You turn your rake on during the sparge. Wouldn't that disrupt the grain bed and make your wort look yucky? This question came from the Hoppy Pills video. That series is kind of like rolling out right now. We're rolling it out. First, it was in the can. Now it is rolling out. I'm an industry professional, okay? Not just on the brewing side, but in the realm of film. You know what I mean? Because let's face it, what I'm doing is film. I didn't even like watching myself say that. I'm trying to remember if I did cut that bed in that video. That's what I would be doing. Typically, I do not run my rake during the sparge. The sparge is when I am spraying and or showering hot liquor tank water onto the surface of my grain bed in order to further rinse, flavor, color, and sugar out of the grain bed. And typically the only time I use my rakes in the mash tun is when I am mashing in and when I am graining out. However, I don't remember if I cut that bed and when I use that terminology, cutting the bed. I don't know if I turned my rakes at all as I was loudering or sparging that beer. I may have, and when I do that, it is because looking at the pressure on my how much draw that I have a sight glass on the side of my mash tun. Sometimes I get into a situation where there's something different about how the beer is running off, and I feel like maybe it's like it's drawing too hard. Like I have like that sight glass on the side is drawing lower than I expect it to for how I'm operating the brew house. And when I feel like I'm drawing extra pressure and I shouldn't be, or drawing too hard, when I'm not actually based on the mechanical settings of the equipment, I will sometimes run a really slow cut on my mash bed. And what I mean by this is some people have rakes that you can raise and lower. Mine are static. They're in one spot and I can't move them up and down. So sometimes people will cut their grain bed from the top and slowly work that down to make sure that they're getting that sparge water equally through everything, right? The risk, though, as Cody mentioned, is you don't want yucky wort, baby. You don't want cloudy stuff going over the kettle. You don't want grain particulate, husk, endosperm, any of that stuff shooting on over to the kettle. You heard? So, if you want to be moving a nice clear wort, yeah, that is a concern. So for me, the only time I cut that bed is when I feel like maybe it's drawing a little too hard, and there might be some utility for me cutting some lines in that mash and potentially getting a more universal flow of sparge liquid, sparge water going through the entirety of that grain bed. All right. So I will do that. I also do it. I turn that rake so slow, you almost wouldn't know it was turning. And sometimes I only turn it a half turn or a full turn. I'm not like ripping it around. There are some brew houses that are outfitted to run really, really ideally like that. Mine is not. Some brew houses you can spin that, you can turn that rake the whole time and you'll get beautiful clear wort. I don't have a filter in between my mash tun and my kettle because I know sometimes they have those that can help with the grain particulate. I don't have that, but yeah. So that's why I do that, and that's how I do that. And it is something rare that I do, and I want to do it very slowly and only for as much time to cut the totality of the bed. Because if I keep turning it with my system, I'm going to get tons of grain particulate over into the kettle. So great question. Thank you very much, Cody. Human on Earth asked, ever experiment with dry hopping right in the keg and leaving it in during serving? A little bit, yeah, man. I played with a few different things in this direction. I have used not so much with pellet hops. I have done that with, I have bagged up whole hops before. And I've done this for festivals, packing a bunch of mosaic whole hops into a firkin, transferring beer on top of it, different things, kind of like a double dry hop type technique or what have you. So I've done it with hot flowers that were bagged up. If you're talking corny keg with that really thin dip tube and that really small poppet area in order to pass liquid through, that area in which you're moving liquid through a Cornelius keg, it can clog up really quick with hot particles. That's one reason that I've never messed around with that a whole lot on that scale. But I do know that people dry hopping kegs, and sometimes they have like this floating draft system type technology where it draws from the top of the keg, and so you won't get into the hops that end up settling out in the bottom until you get, basically all of the beer out. I would check into some stuff like that. Depending on how quickly the beer is being consumed, I would worry about maybe like a longer term contact, especially with that grain matter in there, and maybe that beer shifting over time. But I mean, if you're knocking that keg out in a few weeks, you're probably going to be fine. Just be aware of it and see and see what you have going on there. If it's going to be on longer, I don't know. Maybe it might get too green. It might get too chlorophyll, or it might give you a character that you really, really like. So give it a shot and see what it does. I see Gnome Brewing in there. You can buy an extra dip tube and cut it if that's what you're planning on doing for a keg dry hop. And that's a great point. I had a cut dip tube that I used to keep for when I was I was always packaging beer for competition when I was home brewing. But I would use gelatin. And so I had one where I cut like a couple inches off the bottom of it. And then so all the sediment would drop below that. And then I would pull all the super clear stuff. So yeah, Gnome Brewing, that's an awesome fix on that as well. So yeah, Human on Earth, there you go, brother. I think that was you, right? Good for you. Good for you, person. Human on Earth, I don't know if you're a man. I just called you brother. What are you gonna do? Next question is from Lake Moran Brewery on YouTube. Have you ever brewed with hemp before, Adam? I toasted some hemp seeds and mashed in with the rest of the grist to brew a British brown ale. Still awaiting the results. Would be interested to hear your experience or tips if you had any. So I did a little digging on this, and you did do something that I like quite a bit. I do like the idea when I am using something that's not going to be like, I don't know. How do you want to say it? It's a non-traditional ingredient. So I do like to toast. I do like to toast things like that when I do it because I think that one, as you see, like in cooking, you will see from a culinary standpoint, you will see people getting a little, not quite roast, but a toast on some of their spices to kind of open them up, they'll say, potentially making them a little bit more aromatic. So I like the thought of saying that you're going to toast those things. I also like the idea of raising up the temp on something for killing it, for knocking back little bugs and things like that. From a microbiological standpoint, that may prove to be beer spoiling. I do think it was interesting that you did pair it up with a British brown ale. When you dive into some of the comparisons flavor-wise for hemp seeds, you're going to see things like kind of a combination, like nutty kind of combination between sunflower and pine nut. So yeah, I could see that going well in a style that you might want to be driving a little bit of nuttiness with. There's a few different ways that you can go about that. And maybe you even layer it up. Maybe you bag them up, you toast them up, bag them up. Maybe you get a little bit into your kettle on the hot side. Maybe, I don't know, I would put them in maybe closer to Whirlpool. And then maybe tasting that beer in the fermenter, if you can easily sample without, risking contamination / oxidation, what have you. Kind of tasting that beer, see if the character came through, and then maybe explore a later fermentation, kind of dry hop, dry nutting approach. I think that might be an interesting way to go, because you already have your pH drop happen in your beer, and you already have alcohol in that beer. And so those are two things that are going to be working in your favor from a beer stability standpoint. But yeah, layer it up, check it out. I would also toast them up and taste them like yourself, and see how they taste. Do you like that flavor? Right. The other thing too is I would tell you to be really careful when you are toasting those things. When in my experience, when things that are supposed to be done to one level with heat go beyond that, they can get nasty in a hurry. All right. So be very, very mindful as you're toasting. I would try to go at a lower heat than a higher heat, right? Maybe do a little searching online, but I would want to err on the lower side of the temperature and go longer and keep them moving. Because if you're sauteing onions and you go and you have a beautiful golden brown onion, it's going to be full of flavor. It's going to be fantastic. That thing goes, you scorch that thing and everything's ruined. You have to dump it and start all over again. You can't have that be the base of what you're cooking with. So I would just kind of be mindful of that, to not go too far when you're toasting those things, and see what that does for you. I'd love to hear how that comes out. Thank you, Lake Moran Brewery. I'm loving seeing all the beer talk going on in the chat. I think that's one of the most compelling things, because it's definitely not me. I think that's one of the most compelling things about doing having the chat and having you people being able to see each other month after month. And I don't know, it's cool. Gets me excited. KL Brewing, good to see you. I haven't seen you in here just yet, not tonight, at least. But let's see. This is a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. Next question comes from Robert Ellingwood on YouTube. I have brewed a bunch of 5-gallon batches with the Helio Gazer mash hop, with Cascade, Whirlpool, and Citra and Mosaic. 80% 2-row, the balance with oats and wheat, having great results my last batch. Results. My last batch, I dumped 1.5 gallons on the floor, transferring from mash to kettle, replaced the lost volume with DME. This beer has a guava passion fruit bomb. It is a great fruit. It's awesome. It's super thiolized. My question is, have you messed around with DME with thiolized yeast strains? Was it a fluke, or do you think this yeast plays well with that? I think that's a really interesting question. I don't know. I think you might want to. I think you're gonna have to try. I think you're gonna have to run something a little bit different. So I'll throw away, and this is not going to be a perfect experiment, but what if you made a full batch, and you split it, and you have to have a way to get your gravity back up, right? Because you want your gravities to be equal. So if you pumped up the if you pumped up that split wort, one of them with DME, and then the other one with, pardon me, and you split the other one and dose that one up, or brought up the gravity with that one with something like dextrose, so they'd have the same original gravity. One might ferment out more than the other. I'm just kind of riffing on this. But you definitely get more, and side by side ferment them, same fermentation chamber, splitting the same starter, or equal packet, or whatever. Try to keep as many things the same as you can, and then test that out. I think it would be very cool if utilizing DME would be something that would help you maximize thiol expression with these newer thiolized yeasts. And I think it's an interesting concept, because one thing that we've repeatedly heard from the people at Omega is you should be playing with different types of base malts to see what you can be doing as far as thiol expression. So we might be able to get a different character out of a DME product, as opposed to the typical base grain that you are using. So I think it's interesting. So this one is more of kind of a little review of the concepts, maybe thinking of a way that you can problem solve and plan out your own experiments. But let me know if, and also I kind of just want to get the word out on this. Has anybody else had that experience with DME, and seeing that it kind of plays this role where maybe it maximizes thiols in these hot forward beers that they're making? Let us know. I'm interested. And that is my man Robert Ellingwood. Thank you for the question. Next question is Brian Peterson from YouTube. What do you think about using Philly sour in the primary fermentation and then adding fruit and lactobacillus and letting it age in a barrel? There's a couple of things going on there, man, and I would be tempted. I can make some arguments for you doing it that way, and I think that we'll talk about a couple different ways. I feel like if you're gonna be if you're gonna be using lacto, and you're going to be in a barrel, a lot of times the implication is with the wood, with that barrel, it's in part acting as an inoculation source as well, because it's generally you don't get your hands on clean barrels. I don't care what wineries tell you. If they're getting rid of a barrel, it's more than likely because there's bread in it. But anyways, just my take, and I could be wrong on that, but otherwise, what they just don't want to ferment in that vessel anymore. They just want to get rid of cooperage. I don't know. They want to make less wine. I don't know. Don't get me started on that. But if I were in your situation and you already want to have lacto be the primary fermenter there, like you're going to be actively pitching it and then letting it roll in a barrel, I would just bypass the Philly sour, man. Don't even play with it, because just let the lacto pitch that you're going to be using drive the bus there, along with whatever else is in your barrel. And then I would look at getting that beer on some fruit maybe after you're in the barrel, for a little bit more of extended fermentation time, and let it do it like that, as opposed to fruiting in the barrel and making it a difficult situation. I will say that if you want to be fermenting a beer primarily with lactic acid, I'm gonna say, let's keep those IBUs to 0 in that scenario, because depending on if brain fart. a lot of the lacto cultures that you're going to use can't handle IBUs, and sometimes they can't even handle higher ABVs too. So dig in on that. Make sure the lacto strain that you're going to be using can handle it, and then run it back and finish that back out in another vessel. That would just be my suggestion. There's different ways to do it. But I think you can save yourself a little bit of time and a little bit of money with skipping that first step of fermenting with Philly sour and then starting that whole process. And that said, I'm a fan of Philly sour, and I think there's a time and place for it. So yeah, you do need one pellet to be street legal. Good call, Todd Porter, holding me down here. That is my official take. You do need one pellet, but it can be a small pellet. It can be a little dust. Next question ultimately comes from me, and I could have piggybacked this question with my friend Robert Ellingwood just a few minutes ago when we were talking about Thyli strain. I wanna put something. Let's talk sulfur, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's talk about the stinky stink. Let's talk about that smell when you walk into the brewery. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing to do with your assistant brewer, but something's in the air. You know what I mean? Perhaps it's a potty thing, right? Many of us have children. We can say the word potty. Sulfur is an interesting beast. I've had great conversations with Alex Gruber over the last year about it and how and why and when it's generated. And it is a little bit of a nebulous topic, and there are, can be some rules of thumb that help. But we had I had this mash hopped beer that I did. And it was 20 IBU of Cascade from Crosby in the mash. It was the only hop edition. It was essentially an American wheat beer. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I can make a little wheat beer that would fly out of the pub during the summer. Some slice of citrus in it. Not this is in no way, shape, or form am I saying I'm trying to make a beer like Oberon, but in that spirit of like the summery wheat beer, right? Have it kind of a nice tropical passion fruity thing, maybe a dollop of that wouldn't be a dollop, but a wedge, a slice. And many of you may really break out in hives when I say throw some fruit on the glass or whatever. But dude, it helps you move beer in house. Your bartenders may hate you, and you style purists may hate it, but it sells beer, man. Anyways, and I like to be paid for this because it's my job. So yeah, I'm not against some fruit on the rim of a glass thrown in, maybe and maybe not by the consumer. That's their call. But I wanted to make this kind of tropical little, it's a wheat beer, so it'd have a little haze to it. And a lot of people come in and still say, do you have a wheat beer? So I was thinking, well, maybe this would be a great way that I could do a yeast grower for Heliogazer, because Heliogazer is what I use in Freak Beat, our hazy IPA that we mentioned before, that's going into 12-ounce cans as a core beer, as a core distribution beer for us. And I'm like, well, I could do this non-hoppy beer, right? So I did have 20 pounds, was it 20 pounds? Maybe it was 14 pounds. I have to go back and look at it. But I had a fair amount of hops in the mash. But I mean, that's not sticking through the kettle on into the fermenter. You know what I mean? So I'm going to get a really clean work going into the fermenter, something I could easily harvest off of and split off, because I do a fermentation dry hop with Freak Beat. And so that way I don't like to try to reharvest dry hopped yeast. So I would then be able to repitch the other half of it into another, summertime wheat beer, whatever, and keep rolling it, save myself some money on some yeast. But fermented it out, smelled great, moving along, everything was good. Passing VDK or diacetyl, passed everything, passed sulfur, got it into the bright tank, got it carved, got it into keg, tapped it, and it was a sulfur bomb out of nowhere. And it wasn't in the fermenter, it wasn't in the bright tank, and all of a sudden it was a sulfur bomb in the keg. And so anyways, I was fully prepared to dump this beer, and I was talking to my people up in Cleveland, and a couple of the guys that were working in the brewery said, we've worked at some place in the past, and they worked at some production house in the past, where they said, X, Y, or Z beer is kind of a sulfur bomb the first week it's in the bottle, and then it clears up. And I'm like, okay, we'll see, whatever. Because otherwise it's me dumping 15 barrels of beer. So it's already in the keg. So what's the harm on sitting on it for a couple of weeks? Sat on it for 2 or 3 weeks, tapped it the other day, and it was nice. I mean, it smelled like a bathroom. It smelled like a male public restroom. It was gross. And it cleared, man. And we'll see if and when that beer is going to be going on tap. I sent some up to them to get their thoughts on the beer, but I think it's just a nice little summer crusher. We'll see where that goes. But it was an interesting little beer, and so this is kind of one of those things for some people that are like, well, thiolized strains. It's like, well, I just don't want to make IPA. Like I don't, and I get that. I think you can do some fun things with these beers. This is an interesting little wheat beer. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'll see where it goes, and maybe I'll end up doing a tasting video on it and things like that. I might have to think on that. But anyways, I did want to mention that because we have been talking about sulfur a little bit, and sometimes just exercising a little bit of patience with it as you go. Spunding, September and June, and Spunding und Wirt have a couple of questions. Lager sulfur smells good to me anyways. So that's interesting because to me, lager sulfur, it's not bad. One thing I did notice, which was really interesting, and I think it's going to be coming out soon, but when I spunded that pills toward the end, I had already passed the portion of fermentation where I would have sulfur. And then I spunded it. And when it started blowing off through that spunding valve, it was actually like a fresh match strike. It was a different type of cleaner sulfur. It wasn't like farty. It wasn't bathroom, but it was like sulfur strike. It was like match strike. It was really interesting. And then continuing with Spunding und Wirt, is mash hopping only for thiolized yeast, or will it carry over? And if so, what percentage? So your utilization percentage is going to be different. If we're just talking about as far as that goes, if we're talking about bitterness utilization, your mash hop utilization is going to be significantly lower. I would have to go back and look at my notes and what I referenced from my friend Chris Schneff at Stormcloud as I put that guide together for that recipe. Is mash? I don't think it has to only be for thiolized yeast. I think that the use case for mash hopping and thiolized yeast is talking a little bit about what I'm talking about right here, which is making like a little bit of a nuanced wheat beer. Doing, kind of finding some ways to like paint outside the lines a little bit with some styles that people might be familiar with. So that would kind of be my argument for it right there. But yeah, you can totally mash hop. I don't mash hop a lot. And I think that you would probably notice the difference in the character in more gently flavored beers. So maybe looking into it for your lagers, different things like that. But yeah. So anyways, thank you so much, Adam Makes Beer on YouTube, for wanting to talk about Solar Blast or that thiolized wheat beer. Forget that I called it that, because I don't know if this beer is going to even exist. Okay. 9:30. Woo. Robert Brown on YouTube. He's got a few questions, and I'm going to clump 3 of them together right here. My man, Robert Brown, how fast can you crash your beer? 1 degree per hour, 3 degrees per day? There's a lot of different opinions on this, and I have done the following. With ales, I typically ferment around 68 degrees. Toward the tail end of fermentation, I will turn it up to 71 degrees to help it finish out. And then I will pressurize the tank, and I will drop it to 33 degrees when it's past VDK and past sensory, and it's stable for multiple days. That's what I do, and I just crash it straight down to 33, and it'll happen overnight. I know there are some people, I do the same thing with lagers by and large, except I've done a lot of different things with lagers, but the classic thing I would do is ferment at 50, allow it to ramp up a little bit, and then crash it straight down. Even when I do the more aggressive one. Robert, you have another question coming up, and I want to make sure I'm not stomping on it right now. Yes. So I'm not going to talk about fermenting lagers. But even with my lagers, I will crash them from the high point of their fermentation temperature all the way down. I have stepped that down. My lab is not good enough. I don't have enough time or the expertise to really be able to track the impact that this has on future generations of yeast. I do not feel as if I'm getting negative qualities in these beers from the fast crash, because there's one argument that says you want to get that yeast off of the beer as fast as possible. There's another argument that says that you can shock that yeast, and that yeast will start to expel some flavors and aromas that you may not want in your beer. I can see both cases for it, and I think I'm going to need more at my disposal before I can give like a really good answer for that. I have done both. Just recently, I babied the crash on a Pils a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I do a straight crash with those beers. Robert continues, how long does the beer really need to sit to clean up before crashing? That's one of the reasons I raised the temperature of those ferments toward the end, because as that temperature increases, it can help to encourage the yeast to stay active in reabsorbing some things that, the cleanup phase, the cleanup portion of fermentation, when all sugar has been consumed, and then the yeast are just reconsuming things like diacetyl, potentially acetaldehyde, green apple, little things like that that might be cleaning up. That's kind of what we're referencing. How long does the beer really need to sit and clean up? That can be based on yeast strain, temperature. I would find what is good for you. This is where you need to start. You need good palates around you, or you need to develop your palate. Okay. Be running a VDK test. I've done videos on that diacetyl test. Get very familiar with what acetaldehyde, green apple smells like. Also, really work on diacetyl, other things like that. And because it's going to be your palate, your olfactory, your sensory that is going to make to let you know once that beer hits terminal and is stable for 2 days. I'm really hardcore testing. I'm making sure that I'm making sure that I'm past butter and everything else like that, past BDK. So that would be my recommendation there, Robert. And his next question was, are ales required to condition at the same temp as for lagers, 0 to 1 degree Celsius? Required, I mean, it's a great idea. And it's a great idea because what it's going to do is it's going to help get solids out of solution. And it's also going to force particulate to at the lower temperature. Those particles will stick together a little bit more, get larger, and fall out. So it will make a smoother beer. If you do have time to get your ales really, really cold for a period of time, do it for as long as you can. If you're brewing professionally, as long as you can afford to, right? And you're going to hit some diminishing returns, but do try to get yourself some good quality cold time in there. Obviously, we all know the extended lagering time and process, being between 4 to 6 to 7 weeks, depending on what you're doing there. So yeah, I think that's I think those are some of the things that help with this kind of conditioning and crashing phase of the brewing process. Thank you for the question, Robert Brown. Spooning and Vert, what type of questions would you like to see more of in these live streams? I mean, honestly, right now, the most of the questions that I'm harvesting from the comment section and the YouTube on the YouTube videos. The day before I do this, I was actually doing it today because I spent it's my wife's and I 22nd anniversary as of a week ago, and we got a little time away yesterday, so I didn't do prep on the live stream. But I just go into the YouTube studio portion. I open up all the questions from the last month, and I just start going through and copying and pasting them. And then I try to let them know that I'm going to be answering it. And it works well. I like stuff. I like questions. I like answering like super practical questions. Recipe stuff is good. I like talking about techniques, brewhouse techniques. I like when people ask questions. And believe me, I'm thrilled that anybody's asking me a question about anything. So don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to come off as fussy. But sometimes, like when people are taking information that they've gotten before, implementing it, and then either that or processing it, whether they actually did it or not, and then like they apply it to something else, and then they're asking better questions off of an older question, right? I always love when I see people's thought processes develop, because I think that's a big part of what I really want to be doing. What I really want to help people do is I just don't want them to learn how to rote brew the way I do. I want them to be thinking and breathing and living brewers, right? So you know what I mean? Sometimes you need the guardrails or some of the not guardrails, you need some of the structure. And potentially I can play a role in providing structure for some people. But I like when people start fleshing out beyond that, right? So that's always cool to see. Thank you for the congratulations on the anniversary stuff, you guys. That's kind of you. Todd Porter, should I put a fifth tap in my Keyser tonight or wait till tomorrow? It's 9:40 by me, dude. That's a wait for tomorrow. That's a wait for tomorrow deal. So yeah. And let me hit this one up. Human on Earth. Since fermenting under pressure became popular, Do you practice this with spunding valves? And if so, what brews do you like it for? I'll say this, and I because it's a good nutshell on this. I'd be wary of spunding anything that is a really aggressive ale fermentation strain. I never want to clog a spunding valve, whether it be on the homebrew side or a spunding valve or a larger style pro size spunding valve. The last thing I want is to plug something and to be building more and more pressure and having a PRV blow on my tank or blowing my tank, something like that. That's always a source of concern for me. If you're, if you reliably have cal ale yeast and it never blows off in your system, yeah, try running some spunding on it, things like that. Do keep in mind the idea is that the pressure fermentation from a finished beer standpoint, okay, maybe you can ferment warmer, you can ferment faster, maybe all those things are true, but ultimately it has to come down to what the beer is going to be tasting like in the end, right? So yeah, I mean, if you have an expressive yeast strain, I don't think you want to be putting it under pressure fermentation. Maybe give it a shot and maybe it does something cool that you love. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. What else? I think that was kind of. Oh, and then I think the real use case for it is lagers. But one, because you don't have to worry about them blowing off in the same way, depending on how much work's going into your fermentation vessel. I mean, you can do I don't think I need to lay that out. But yeah, I mean, I don't think many of us, the blow-offs that we see, on Instagram and Facebook, YouTube, and whatever, that's all ale stuff. You know what I mean? That's not lager stuff that's shooting all over the place. So, yeah. Jamie Tripp, what about just spunding after 5 days to capture CO2? Yeah, I think that's great, man. I don't have a problem with that. The thing is, though, is just always keep an eye out on what's happening with your sulfur. And if you're in a position to potentially track yeast health, if you are going to be repitching, just have those things in the back of your mind as you're doing that. Next question comes from the wow. All right. We're gonna run through these a little bit. All right. I think I've been expounding for too long. Next question is from our man, Brewer's Assistant, Jamie Tripp. This is a likely question around brew day prep and might be answered or more appropriate in a video. What does your day before and brew day prep look like? And would it be of value to show us viewers a bit more of the brew house control side of things? I'll go back and check out the past instructional videos. That is a good side note. Please go to the tabs, the playlists. There's tutorials. There's a bunch of different stuff in there that you might not know about. I think I've got 330 videos now. There's a ton of stuff. Dig back through the playlist. There might be some things back there that you didn't know were there. But as always, thanks, Jamie Tripp, you're the man. So let's talk about it. And I think I could probably do a video on it as well. But let's just talk big picture. And this is the exact same thing that I did when I was brewing at home. When I got serious about brewing at home, I stopped drinking while I was brewing. That's one thing, but that's not necessarily in relationship to your question. When I was brewing at home, I brewed in a similar way to what I do right now. When I was brewing at home, I had small kids, which I still have small kids. And after they would be in bed, I would prep everything. I would have all my equipment clean that needed to be clean. I had my bucket of sanitizer that was going to be good and ready to roll. I had everything pre-measured. I had my water out in various vessels on the stove. Yes, I brewed on the stove at home. Dude, everything was clean and ready to roll. There was literally nothing I could do other than just wait for water to heat up for me to start this brew day in the morning. Okay. I like being in the same place right now. Ideally, when I walk out the day before I brew, the hot liquor tank is rigged up to be ready to recirc so I can get it homogenized and I have one solid temperature to go all the way through. In a perfect world, I have my salts and acid in a sealed container, separate sealed containers, ready for the mash. I have my brew log clipped into my clipboard with a pen. Everything is staged up. I need to walk in, start circulating the hot liquor tank, make coffee, talk to Josh, and just ease into the day. The fermenter is already clean. Like, I don't want to be running CIP on that. I obviously I'm going to be running SIP, sanitation in place, so I'm going to be sanitizing ahead of time. I like everything possible to be done that can be done. I want that all taken care of. I don't want it to be dirty in there. I don't want it to be messy in there. Now my desk is messy. You guys, it's like you've been in there. You've seen plenty of things. Like, so, I mean, it's not perfect, but I want it to be clean in there just because it's easier. And I think one of the things we forget is an uneventful brew day is the best brew day. A lazy brew day is the best brew day. And when I mean lazy, it's not that you're not staying busy, but it's not you're not running around with your hair on fire. Okay. You just want everything laid out. It's the whole mise en place, man. It's the chef thing. You want everything in its place. All right, because then you're going to have a good service, or you at least give yourself an opportunity to have a good service at that point. And it's the same thing with the brew day. So it's mise en place, baby. It's setting up ahead of time, being ordered, and being ready to roll. So, yeah. All right. So let's keep it popping. Jamie, thanks for the question, man. Scott Goebel on YouTube. I've been using phosphoric acid for my IPAs and lactic for lagers. I have found that without adjusting for pH, the color of the beer is too dark. I've added acid malt as well, but I'm afraid to add too much acid malt. Not sure why. Am I thinking too hard? You are not thinking too hard. There's nothing wrong with using acid malt. It's a perfectly good way to adjust your mash pH. There's a rule of thumb on that, and I may have discussed it before, but I think it's a pound per or 1% of the grist for every 1/10 that you want to be dropping. No, that's not right. It's something, or maybe it's 1 pound per 1/10. I don't know. I'm being wild. Somebody might have that better than me. But yeah, there's information on how much acid malt to use. Don't be afraid of that. You do probably want to be using phosphoric or lactic in order to adjust your sparge water, though, because remember we are big fans of adjusting sparge water pH here at Adam Makes Beer. And but the interesting thing is I had to look it up today because this is one of the reasons why I like doing this stuff. You guys help me keep learning things. This actually dovetails with an upcoming question. But the higher the pH of your mash and your wort pH in the kettle, the more color you're going to generate in the kettle. So yes, if you are adjusting your beers down with lactic or phosphoric acid, and then not another time, that same grist could very well come out darker out of the kettle. So because it actually helps to lower pH actually helps to limit wort darkening as at the hand of Maillard reactions in the kettle. All right. So yeah, no, you're not being crazy. You're not thinking too hard. But yeah, keep using those things. Give the acid malt a shot, and you're not crazy by saying that a higher pH wort will get darker for you, even if it's the same grist. So yeah, thanks so much, Scott Goebel. Next question is from // on YT on YouTube. Great topic. Can you talk a little bit about the benefit of dropping the kettle pH down to around 5? Is it for hop extraction or for yeast health? I've been doing it for my brews recently, and it was purely based on recommendations. Would love to learn more about the science behind why it's beneficial. One is what we just talked about a moment ago, which is by dropping kettle pH, you can limit the amount of you can help to limit kettle formation that happens during the boil, especially if you're running something like a direct fire system where you got a bunch of heat on the bottom, and you could be darkening up your wort there through caramelization and or Maillard reactions. This will help you make a paler beer. So that might be cool for you on that hand. And getting your kettle pH down to 4.9 will also help with protein coagulation, or breaking more protein out of solution, helping you give you some clearer wort. So that's another wonderful option when it comes to those things. So yeah, those are a couple good reasons to be dropping that kettle pH a little bit. Typically that kettle pH, if you're adjusting your mash and your sparge water, will be like in the 5.3 to 5.5 range, and it will drop on its own a little bit. That range, if you're dropping into 5.1, 5.2, you will get plenty of break and everything like that to create a clear beer. But if you are looking to, push that a little bit further, you can definitely drop down to 4.9, and you might end up seeing, a very, very clear wort coming out of your kettle, maybe the likes which you have not seen before. So anyways, // thank you for the question. Dimivam on YouTube. Hey, Adam, thanks for the video. You're welcome. When you empty the bright tank, do you empty the CO2 into the air? So let's talk, because when I keg out a beer out of a bright tank, that tank is, by and large, essentially all full of CO2. For us, I work in a very well-ventilated workspace. It is very good to have CO2 alarms in your brewery, especially in a cellar situation and a more closed situation. We are very open air and very well ventilated, but CO2 is still something that you need to be very, very careful with. We have protocol in place that we do not put any part of our body inside that open tank that is dumping CO2. But typically what I will do is, the question is, you can take it in a couple of directions, from a safety standpoint and also from a practical cleaning standpoint. We kind of talked about the safety standpoint. Let's also talk about the practical cleaning standpoint. If you are going to be running caustic on a tank that is full of CO2, you run the risk of neutralizing the cleaning capacity of your caustic cleaner. So sometimes breweries will open a vessel. They will run fans into it. They will run a vacuum on it to try to pull atmosphere into the tank to dump that CO2. What I find with the tanks that I have, the size tanks I have with, and the practices that I use, I feel as if I get that out of the way and I am not neutralizing that caustic. We've not seen that caustic break down through the titration tests that we do. What I do is, when I have a cold tank that is going to be going from cold up to hot, if you go back to my tutorial series on CIP cleaning a fermenter, I will open it up. And so it will start dumping. It will start dumping CO2. You want to be mindful of where your face and head is in relation to that. Sometimes if you see the light coming in, the reflection on the floor, you can actually see the waves of gas pouring out of it. It's kind of wild. But I always rinse a tank cold a cold tank with cold water, because even my groundwater is warmer than the tank. And then I take it from cold city water up to a blend of hot and cold water. So it's up 80, 90 degrees. And then I will go and turn that off, and I will go to my hot liquor tank, and I will blast hot liquor tank water through that spray ball on the tank that I am cleaning, both as a rinse, but also as a way to be blowing that gas out of that tank as well. It seems to work very effectively, and that is the process that I use. Do go ahead and check out that CIPing a fermenter and or bright tank on in the playlist section under tutorials, I believe. And yeah, so yeah, open fermentation have advantages. That blows me away that you used to do that in September. Next question is from Ron Barnes. This is really interesting. The water profile sounds more like a hazy profile, but I have found I really enjoy a more chloride to sulfate ratio in most beers. I've never tried that in a West Coast style IPA. What's your preference on chloride to sulfate ratios in West Coast IPAs? Do you know what most West Coast brewers are doing these days on their ratios? So this is in relation to the fantastic conversation that I had with Bill Gerds, head of brewing operations from Linwood Brewing Concern outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. You're going to want to go back and check out that interview. That interview is coming out in clips right now, but if you want to get the totality, you really should. We had a good time in there. We had a lot of laughs. Listen to it treat it like a podcast. Throw it on as you're driving in the car, and listen to that, or when you're running. There's some great stuff, because Bill's a really talented brewer, and we just have fun together. So in that video, Bill talks about how even in their West Coast beers, they just really push chloride. And I am in the same boat too. There's really only a beer like if I was making like German Pilsner, and even hoppier pills today, like kind of the modern Italian pills or hoppy pills adaptation of that style or evolution of that style. I still wouldn't go bonkers with it, but I would go a little bit more sulfate forward. I would go 2-to-1 sulfate on something like a hoppy pills, targeting 100 parts per million of calcium total. But I would lean more on the sulfate. I don't do a lot of West Coast beer, but I would probably still push chloride on it, man. Even if I were, because I would approach the hopping different than I would a hazy beer. And I prefer a softer impression even on my West Coast stuff. So, and I just approach that by, historically, I've just never been a big bittering addition guy. And the first IPA I ever made was a beer called Professor for a brewery called Crankers in Big Rapids, Michigan. And that was the first IPA I ever made. And it was 4 ounces. It was a handful of Magnum at 60 and 15 barrels. So it was nothing. It was just something to break the kettle. And then it was £1.25 pound per barrel in the Whirlpool. And that was it. We did modify that over time. When I was working with Andy Gallagher, we added a little bit more, like a 10-minute edition or whatever. But to me, when I softened up West Coast IPA by doing that, you know what I mean? By not having the aggressive 60-minute edition and then throughout the whole thing and really stacking up IBUs. I just wanted a ton of flavor and aroma and just enough bitterness to be balanced in it. Yeah, so that's how I got the softer profile. So I mean, what most people are doing right now, I don't know. I would guess that most people are still going chloride or going sulfate forward. But yeah, I would say, and this is, I don't hate to give this answer. I think it's the right one. Brew yourself a West Coast and do a legit, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 sulfate to chloride, and then flip it. Do 3-to-1 both ways, and then opposite each time, and see what you prefer. I think you're gonna find something out. So yeah, I would definitely encourage you to do that. And I think it's a great question, Ron. So I appreciate you writing in. Next question comes from Joshua on YouTube. I would love to hear your thoughts on the downsides of using iodine. I've only ever used Star San, so it would be a nice comparison from a pro like yourself. We've been talking about different kind of sanitizers and how I like to use them. I love using iodine as like my long-term soak at the beginning of the day. All my smalls go into a container with the appropriately dosed amount of iodine. And then that stuff comes out. It will get sprayed with ISO again before things go into tanks because I'm paranoid, but whatever. Jamie Tripp, thank you very much. And what I think is a less ideal utilization of iodine is circulation in a CIP, in a tank, whether that be bright tank, fermenter, what have you. The reason I say that is, and if you're somebody that uses iodine in that way and has no problems with it, that's awesome. That's great. But what I do know is that when you circulate a beer like that, when you circulate that chemical like that, when you circulate a diluted iodine solution, it will start getting paler. It'll start losing color. And this is not the most sciencey way to approach it, but I did have a lab assistant one time said, if it's red, it's dead when it comes to iodine. Now, obviously, that's not hard number science. But what the idea here is that as oxygen, as your diluted iodine solution is exposed to oxygen, it will start to break down and be rendered more neutral, okay, or less effective, okay. And so if you're in a situation where you are circulating that through a tank that is full of atmosphere, you can start stripping your iodine, okay. I do use an ATP swab in the brewery. I put a post on it on Instagram the other day. It's a swab that comes, it's a sterile swab. You open it up, you run sanitizer on a tank, you open up the tank, swab it like in an up and down, and then back across. Okay. And then it goes back in the test tube. You break the top, squeeze the liquid down, shake it, and then it goes in the test reader. Our spec for that is from 0 to 10. All right. And that'll show like what is potentially living in there. I don't think we've ever had more than a 4, and it's almost always a 1 or a 0. Okay. I would be interested to see what things are like if you, or I would be interested to run an ATP swab on a iodine circulated tank. Maybe it would be great. It very well could be. I would be interested to see what your iodine concentration looks like at the beginning of your circulation and at the end of your circulation. The other thing mentioned, another reason that I may not like iodine in a CIP or a circulation type cleaning practice is some versions of iodine that I have used foam, and foaming is a pain when you're trying to run a pump. So those are my ins and outs on that. Thank you very much for the question, Joshua. We're on to the final page. We're on the home stretch, people. Willie's 44 on YouTube. We just brewed a batch of wheat ale on new 3-barrel equipment. Everything went perfect, very active fermentation. However, final flavor profile came off as sour. What gives? Mash pH was on target in the mid-5s. All cleaning protocols on point. However, cool down post-boil to pitch temp was longer than planned. The knockout time was, I believe, close to 3 hours. Lallemand Classic Munich yeast used. Final package pH in the mid-3s. So it went sour. Still a very tasty beer, however. Yeah, man. if you haven't seen, I would keep an eye on the subsequent batches. And this is not going to be, this is not meant to sound rude at all. But a lot of times we don't know there's a problem until something consistently starts happening, right? So one of the things is that I would look at, if you do know whatever your transfer line was, explore all those things, because and I would also look at wanting to do maybe sometimes you can do like real deep dive, quarterly cleans. Now might be a really good time to revisit that. Start looking at all of your softs on the cold side. So any gaskets that you use on the cold side, any hoses that you use on the cold side that may need to be swapped out or may need to be exposed to a more rigorous cleaning treatment. Think on that stuff. If the Lallemand Classic Munich yeast was a repitch, that it may have been contaminated. But dropping into the mid threes, if you've been tracking your pH through the process and everything was good, it implies there's something going on there. Thankfully, the beer wasn't a loss because it's still tasty. But I would really dig back in on that stuff. And if you can, tighten up that knockout time. You want to be getting your whirlpool rested and knocked out and in contact with yeast as soon as possible. So as you extend that time and drop that temperature, you're just making that work more hospitable to things that will compete with your yeast that you may not want competing with your yeast. So Willie 44, I appreciate your question, man. Thanks so much. Robert Brown, what is your SOP for fermenting lagers, ales? Is there anything you do different from one to the other? We'll nutshell this up real quick. With ales, I typically pitch between 66 and 68 degrees. I allow it to ramp up in the last portion of fermentation up to 70 or 71 when I'm going from like maybe 1020 down to like 1012, kind of that last couple points, those last couple points Plato. I will let that ramp up there. And then when it hits terminal, I will crash it down to 33. I will give it at least 2 days cold. I'll knock the bottom off the cone, harvest it, harvest yeast, and move on from there. Okay. There is a VDK rest, sensory stuff that it passes as well before I crash. And that's pretty standard for that. What I'm doing with my lagers, what I typically do with my lagers is I will pitch at 50. On day 2, I will turn the temperature to 52. Day 4, I go to 55. And then I let it roll there until I really have, I have the super majority of fermentation done, and then I'll take the top off it to let it go up to 65. And I will let it go to terminal, pass VDK and all the other sensory, seal up the tank, pressurize it, and drop it to 33 directly. That's what I do. I'm playing around within that range with different things. And because I'm always looking to try to learn new stuff. So sometimes I'll pitch warmer. Right now I'm running my lagers with the Augustiner strain with harvest from Imperial. I'm running it at 55 degrees. We'll see. So yeah. Anyways, but yeah, I do take gravity readings on that September. That's the idea. And I actually have it broken down to percentages as well. But I would have to dig up that information a little bit. So yeah, that is what I do with that, Robert Brown. Thank you for the question. Walter on YouTube. Hi, Adam. How long does the dough in take? And how many kilograms of malt do you put in? I have some numbers here for you. It takes me 18 to 28 minutes from water on to water off. So when I first start adding hot water to my mash tun, to where the mash is done, I have all the grain in and all the hot water in. I always have my grain in before the water is completely finished, just to make sure that I don't end up having a situation where my grain is like gumming up in the grist hydrator. So it takes me about 18 to 28 minutes from water on to water off, or from starting the mash in to ending the mash in. For me, and I have metric prepared for you, but typical beers for me in the brew house are between 770 pounds and 1,200 pounds. And I typically end up using between 385 gallons and 450 gallons in the mash. And this is the strike. That is 350 kilograms to 545 kilograms of malt, and 1,457 to 1,700 liters of water. All right. So that's typically a grist, a mash to grist ratio of 1.5 quarts per pound, or 2 quarts per pound. We're almost at our last question here, you guys. So, but yeah, that's where we are at with what I am doing for my dough-in time and everything like that. Remember, it's not a race. You can slow down, you can speed up, you'll be all right. But yeah, that's the breakdown of how I do that stuff. And then we actually have one more, and it is from our man Jamie Tripp. And remember that Jamie Tripp has that beautiful brewery that he is opening up there in Canada, and he has a question kind of related to that. How much time do you spend in the tap room interacting and engaging with the guest? What are your takeaways generally? I interact with guests a bit more now than I have in the past, because I do have situations where people more frequently come in and ask for me because of the stuff that I am doing online with the channel. So in those instances, when I have time, I come out, I introduce myself, I talk to them, see what they're doing, what they're enjoying. I try to talk beer, answer any questions. If I can give them a quick tour, I will. It's really important to be upbeat and to be grateful for them being there. And if you don't have that in you at that time, you shouldn't be going out and talking to guests. When you walk out from the brewery, anytime you are visible while you are there, you are representing your beer. In the same way that if the bartender is representing the service. Okay. So when you cross that threshold, if you brew in a fishbowl, or you brew in a situation where people can see you, you have to carry yourself like you're being seen. That's my thought, because you are your own brand as a brewer. And you want to have positive interactions with the public. And yeah, that's kind of my general thought. If I have the time, I always come out and give what I can to the customer. People appreciate it. Always be patient and gracious. And yeah, that's kind of my thought. People have an inordinately a positive interaction with the brewer is typically worth more than positive interactions with other people that work for the company. So be mindful of that and be grateful of that, and don't let it blow your head up and give you an ego. So that's my take on it. But ladies and gentlemen, that is probably the longest running, like legit, because we started at 8. I used to start these up earlier and then just start at 8. But this is the long runner today. So I want to thank you all for all of the questions, for all the love from the chat and support in there. Please keep in mind, we are going to be talking to the wonderful Jenny Reed on the 23rd of June. We're going to be talking attending brewing school, attending UC Davis, breaking into the industry that way, and breaking down one of her favorite beer styles, which is TBD, but you aren't going to want to miss it. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I am grateful and appreciative to see you all in here, to see all of the likes. One of the best things you can do to support this channel is to spread it everywhere you can, every online forum. Anytime there's something that fits from content you've seen from me, share it with other people. And it really does help to like, subscribe, and all that stuff too, and leave comments. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful month. I'll see you in just a couple of weeks here a little bit later in June. And I hope you all have a fantastic night. Bye.